What's up, everybody? It's Ty the Bourbon Guy, and welcome back to another whiskey review. Today, we are reviewing Green River Wheated Bourbon. Now, this one is relatively new, but was labeled the Weller Killer. And ever since then, it seems like the hype behind this has been just through the roof. So I'm here to just test it out. Is it really a Weller Killer? And I think if you're going to say that, we need to be very specific. And I get it. I understand the whiskey game. Everybody wants the headline and what's, Weller's the new Pappy and this is the new Weller and what, I don't know, whatever. Do you like the whiskey or not is the important thing. I think if you are looking for an alternative to Weller because you can't find it, I get that. But, the most important thing to do is just to try it for yourself and see what you think. But I understand where people are coming from with that. The fact that it's a new wheated bourbon on the market, rather. But, it's one of those things like, let's be a little bit more specific about what we're talking about. But that's what I'm here to do. Taste test it, figure it out. Is it good or not? So overall, I think the bottle itself looks pretty good. I mean, it's nothing crazy. It's not like too tall or anything. It'll fit on my shelf, really regardless of whichever shelf I have or whatever. I kind of like this little horseshoe at the bottom. I don't know why I dig that, but I do. And Green River actually was recently acquired by Bardstown Bourbon Company. So there was some pretty interesting things coming out of Owensboro, Kentucky and Green River already. But I think now being acquired by Bardstown is just going to take them over the top even more so, in my opinion. One of their biggest claim to fame here at the bottom, DSP KY10, meaning that they were the 10th distillery in Kentucky. So I don't really feel like that's marketing to me. I just feel like that's part of their history. And if I own the 10th distillery, I'd throw it on the label too. So I don't really feel like they're trying to necessarily sell to me for that. There might be some pieces to that when somebody buys it, they can give it to somebody and say this was, from that type of distillery from way back in the day type of thing. But I don't know. I don't really look at that as like over the top marketing or anything like that. I think the bottle itself is pretty simple. I don't feel like they're trying to like oversell me on anything in particular. No crazy stories or somebody's recipe, this or that, whatever. It just kind of is what it is. So more importantly than the outside of the bottle, let's take a look at what's on the inside of the bottle. Pour this up. So a little sip and oops, a little bit more. So let's smell this and see what it's about. You can tell too, the bottle's open and there's a little bit gone. Let it just open up a little bit. It's only 90 proof, so it's not like it's packed with proof and I gotta let it sit and air out and all that stuff. But I do feel like regardless of a proof, I think whiskeys just over time kind of open up and maybe give you more flavors than what we saw previously when we first opened the bottle. But even with this one, again, 90 proof and the fact that it's a wheated bourbon is telling me that this should be pretty soft. And on the nose, I think that follows through. There's not really any harsh notes. It's not full of ethanol or like I smell it and all of a sudden it's all the alcohol and all that. I don't get any of that. It's just a soft nose and it's a bright nose. So it's more of the citrus fruits. I know this is a cop out because it's a wheated bourbon, but it reminds me of bread, almost like not toast, but just like bread with jelly on it. Some type of like grape jelly is actually what this reminds me of. As if maybe I'm about to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and I get the jelly on the bread, something like that. Unless you're like me, like I do a 2-to-1 peanut butter jelly ratio, 2-to-1, 2 being the peanut butter, I guess. But either way, when you spread that jelly on the bread, it just kind of, as it's sitting there on the bread, those notes kind of mix together. That sweetness of that jelly is kind of what this reminds me of. But it's definitely in the brighter direction. It's not anything dark or heavy like tobacco, leather, chocolate, coffee, nothing like that. This is all very bright. Yeah, pleasant nose. It's approachable. It's not aggressive. I'd imagine the palate's going to follow that, but let's see. Cheers. Even at 90 proof, it doesn't feel watered down. Sometimes when I go into a lower proof whiskey, it just feels watered down. It feels like there's a lack of flavor. Kind of reminds me of like when you get a soda, or people in the Midwest call it pop. But kind of like when you get that and you get a whole thing of ice, and over time it kind of, the ice melts, it waters down, and that soda starts to, Obviously, I only took one sip, already stuttering, but it obviously starts to water down the soda a little bit and lose flavor. Sometimes with whiskey, I get the same thing. It's like kind of can taste watered down, but this to me doesn't taste watered down. It tastes like, yes, they put it at 90 proof, but it's almost like 90 proof was the better proof for it. That's without me trying it at a higher proof, obviously, but just in general, this kind of it's not lacking anything by being at 90 proof. It's approachable, it's not aggressive, it still's warm enough that somebody like myself that enjoys higher proof bourbons is not going to be turned off by it. But somebody that maybe is not a fan of higher proof bourbons and maybe is a fan of either lower proof bourbons or maybe is new to the whole bourbon game and you're trying to stick to something lower, maybe you don't want to melt your face off that day. I don't know. But either way, I think really anybody can enjoy this. It does seem like one that maybe during summertime when it's a little bit warmer outside that maybe I'd reach for a little bit more often. Typically in the wintertime, I'm looking for something with more of some of those spices, some of that heat, higher proof, those darker notes, things like that. But either way, it doesn't really matter. I still would reach for this and be just fine. So now it almost reminds me of like, still on the sweeter side though. It's like French vanilla ice cream, something like that. Kind of reminds me of that, maybe with a little bit of the cone in there. That's kind of what this is reminding me of. But either way, you're still on the sweet train. You're going in that direction. I wouldn't say it's overly complex. There's not really much there. Weirdly enough, I am getting some oak. And I say weirdly enough, I don't necessarily know how old this is. Non-age stated, obviously, but yeah, doesn't say anything on here. But you know, typically you get oak on some of the older products. I don't know how young this is or how old, but either way, there's still some oak in there. Not too oaky. It's barely noticeable, really. But I don't really feel like this is overly complex. I'm not going on some type of roller coaster with the flavors. It just kind of is what it is. It smells sweet, it smells soft, and it tastes sweet and tastes soft. So it just kind of follows the nose, and we're just kind of going in the direction that we're going. We're not going any crazy, you know, it smelled like this, and now all of a sudden it tastes like this. So yeah, so I think in terms of it being a Weller killer, again, let's be very specific. Special Reserve, I absolutely would take this over Special Reserve, especially the fact that I can't find Special Reserve. And I mean, I have been able to find it at retail, but it's rare. But for this, I'm trying to remember the exact price point. I think I paid somewhere in the $30 to $40 range. So I think, you know, given that, yeah. And here in Indianapolis, where I live, this is pretty available. It's sitting on the shelves. Not every liquor store carries it yet, but I would assume they're going to start picking up on that as they hear the hype and all of that stuff. But right now, the stores that do have it have plenty of it. But, you know, it's not necessarily everywhere. But at that price point, I can understand Special Reserve. But when you say this is a Weller killer, let's be very clear about what that is, at least in my book. I'm picking 107 over this. This isn't trying to kill Weller Full Proof or Weller 12 year or Antique, anything like that. But in terms of Special Reserve, yeah, I think it is a good alternative. And if you're looking for a wheated bourbon and maybe you're not a fan of Maker's Mark, because there's plenty of people that I know that like Weller Special Reserve, but don't necessarily like Maker's Mark, don't necessarily like Larceny, don't necessarily like some of the other wheated bourbons on the market. This might be one that they might try. Like I said, the fact that this is available, I get it as an alternative. Be aware of what something actually is and what it's meant to be. There's been people that have messaged me in the past and asked me, you know, hey, I spent $200 to get this Special Reserve. Is that a good deal? No, it's not a good deal. It's a terrible deal. But if you've tried Special Reserve and that's your favorite whiskey of all time and you can't find it and the only time you can find it is at that price point or something like that, then I get that 100%. Do whatever is comfortable for you, but you know, you're the master of your own pockets. So if you got the money to spend on whiskey like that and and that's your favorite whiskey of all time, then who am I to tell you otherwise? But I think the problem that I see is that people are just eager to get a bottle to say they have it. You buy it, and then you're either disappointed by it because you don't think it's worth that amount of money, which it shouldn't be worth that amount of money, to be fair, or you buy it and it sits on a shelf and you just wasted however much money. So I think you just have to be careful about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Keep in mind always what that bottle is trying to do, what that brand's trying to do with that product. And again, this necessarily, in my opinion, I don't think they were necessarily trying to get rid of, kill off Antique or Full Proof or anything like that, or compete with them. I think they were trying to make a very good wheated bourbon, and I think that's what they did. So enough talking. I think when it comes to the finish, it's short to a medium finish. There's not really much there, but again, with this proof, I kind of expect that. I think overall, given all those things I just said, I would say 8.7. I'll rate this 8.7 out of 10. I've already explained all the reasons, so I'm not going to keep hashing it out, but it's a good product. It's a great bottle of whiskey. It's one that I don't think you necessarily need to try first or anything like that. The price is not too crazy. So if you see it on a shelf, buy it and try it. And I think the only situation I could see is if you maybe make a lot of cocktails and you're looking for a whiskey for that, and you want the whiskey to stand up to the cocktail, not like you're pouring a bunch of soda in it and you want to mask the flavor. Not talking about that. But if you make certain cocktails and you want to still taste the whiskey, I think you should either go with something with a little bit more spice profile to it, or something a little bit higher proof, so that that whiskey stands up to that cocktail. But for right now, this particular bottle, I don't think that anybody would be upset by this. I think if you're looking for a gift with the holidays coming up, whether it's a gift for somebody who's new to whiskey, or whether it's a gift for somebody who is heavy in the game, I think really, no matter who buys this bottle, I think they'll be happy with it. I don't know that I've heard anybody dislike this bottle yet. But again, nothing I would pay anything crazy for, no secondary prices, nothing like that. But if you see it, buy it. That's my review for today. I appreciate everybody tuning in. If you stayed here this long, you might as well subscribe and like and comment and do all that stuff. Y'all know the whole thing, right? So do it all. I appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody being here, showing all the love and support, and I'll see you in the next review. Cheers.